You remember this old girl? This is my 1965 Dodge Monaco. It's been off the road for at least 40 years now. And whenever I actually tried to get this thing running, it wouldn't run. The engine was locked up and it fought me every step of the way. At the end of that video I mentioned, hey, I might just go ahead, pull this engine out and put another one in it. But there was a strong support to see the original engine get rebuilt. So what we're gonna do today, drag this thing up to the shop, take the engine out, see what could possibly be wrong with it, see if it's even salvageable, and move on from there. So stick around to the end of the video to see just how bad this engine is and if we can even use it. I mean it when I say this car was literally buried deep in the woods of Alabama. We drug it out after spending all day in the hot sun, and I attempted to get it running for the first time in at least 40 years. I found out the engine was stuck, poured every fluid known to man down the carb, gave up, and decided to pressure wash it. That is where we are today. In the last video, I talked about what we were doing, and we tried to basically get this thing unstuck. I drowned it full of ATF. I poured diesel fuel down the carburetor to the point where it was actually coming out of the dipstick tube for the oil. I mean, I put a lot of stuff into this thing, and I still couldn't get it to come unstuck. The linkage, you can see it's a little frozen, but I was able to manage to work it free. But still, it just, everything on this car is old and stuck and rotted. So the best thing to do is to literally just take it out. Now what we're gonna do is hook it up to my truck, pull it up to the shop where we have a little bit more access to tools, and see if we can actually get this thing to, you know, come out of here and see what's wrong with it, because I'm curious just like you guys are. We've got two wheels locked up, so we're going to attempt to use the tractor to somehow get it into the shop. I'm really hoping that this works out. I've got an idea though. I brought this tote lid with me. I really don't know if it's going to work, but I think what I can do is pick one side up, shove that tote lid up under a tire, and hopefully that'll help it slide. Because the other side will work, but one side doesn't. So let's see if we can get this thing a little bit closer to the shop, and then throw this tote lid under right there. I really need some casters or rollers or something, but maybe that'll keep the rubber from gripping the pavement so bad. I'm going to straighten the wheel, give Tony a little bit better straight shot towards the garage. All right. See if that works. getting old. Nice and crunchy. Oh. I'm doing something very stupid right now. I'm going to put a battery in here, and I'm just going to bump the starter and just see if it'll turn at all. This is not a good way to do it, but I've seen it happen before where it will unlock something. The starter is stronger than I am. I've used a pry bar on the crank bolt, but nothing happened. So we're going to try and just bump the starter just a little bit, and see if it can actually break it loose. The spark plugs are out, so there's no compression that can build up. So the engine literally, it doesn't have to fight anything except the resistance from the rings. So, if there's any rust on the rings, maybe that'll break it free, and hopefully that'll get it to where it's unstuck. And then if it is unstuck, then we'll put it back together and try to make it run. Well, that battery kind of concerned me because no lights came on, nothing. But then I went and looked at the back, and I don't know if it's a brake light or a tail light, but that tells me that there's at least some sort of power circulating in this car. So we could have blown headlights, or maybe like a dimmer switch is bad. So I guess we can try and cross it over now. Let me get a screwdriver and see what we can do. No, 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 not gonna work. Did something just happen? Did it spin?
Something sounded like it started leaking. Do you hear that?
It's moving.
Oh, it's rust.
Look, watch.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it move that time.
It just spun over. You ready? No way! No way! Yes! Tony, it spins over. Ah, that's what I've been trying to get done for oh, you have no idea. You have no idea. Oh, the amount of pressure that has released from my skull. Oh, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful. I didn't think that would work. Honestly, like I said, I've heard of it happening. I've seen people do it, but I genuinely did not believe that the starter would be able to spin it over. I'm so glad I tried to bump it one more time. So all the cylinders are probably full of fluid and stuff, so it's probably going to make a mess all over the floor. But I don't care right now. Let's spin it over and see if we can get a little bit more momentum out of it. I'm shaking. I'm so excited. What is that?
No, that's fluid of some sort.
Is that coolant?
I don't know.
It might be from all the stuff I poured in the cylinders. Yeah, that's what that is. Ooh. See, look at that. It's coming out of the spark plug hole. Watch. See it? Ooh, what is that sound?
That was a belt.
It sounds absolutely terrible, but it's working. The engine is not stuck anymore. Wow. Well, it looks like we don't have to pull the engine out, Tony. Isn't that great? Oh, I'm very happy. I'm very, very happy. It's giving me hope. And what I want to do now is drain the oil pan, because in the last video, which you haven't seen it yet, it's in the top right now, I filled this thing to the brim with diesel fuel. And like I said earlier, it was pouring out of the dipstick. I literally could not put any more diesel in it. And I was hoping that would unstick it. And I guess letting it sit for all that time helped that. It helped that ring, and all that rust kind of dissolve and break up. And I'm hoping that's what the case was.
So what I'm going to do is jack it up and drain all that out and work right here and lay on my sway bar. And then whenever we get all that fluid drained out of it, we will go and get an oil change for it, put a new filter, 5 quarts of oil, and see if we can get anything to run on this one. Oh, we need spark plugs. Do I have spark plugs? I bought some spark plugs for it. I couldn't tell you where they went. I put them in something, didn't I? Who knows? Oh my good Lord, look under the car. Look at all the fluid back that way. Gotta go on the side of the car.
Oh my Lord.
That's what was inside the combustion chamber on each cylinder. I mean, I had them. I've put ATF, I put PV Blaster, Croil, Marvel Mystery Oil. I put everything I can think of in all 8 cylinders to the point where, I mean, it couldn't hold any more. So I knew that at least the top of the cylinder was completely coated. So whenever we were spinning that over, all of that fluid got pushed out of each cylinder, and it has just soaked the floor. So I was trying to keep it clean, and I was doing my best, but obviously that didn't work. That is nasty. Oh God. I sniffed it. Oh. Oh, there's a hole in it. Oh no. There's a hole in it, Tony. There's a hole in the thing. We have a problem. Drain plug. Tony, where's the drain plug?
Oh, that's disgusting.
Oh, there's so many liquids in the floor right now. I hope that holds it all. I really hope it does. Come on. Okay. Woo. Old vintage Motorcraft oil filter. It's been on there for a long time. Ew. Let's see if I can find a date on this. Nope. But it's very, very old. We're just going to put a filter on there for temporary use. And then I want to clean all this stuff out, you know, with an oil change. And then we'll do another oil change once we let it run for a little bit and break loose a lot of that, you know, built up debris and whatever the case may be. You know what I just realized?
What?
I've never actually put oil in this car. It's been only fluids that should not belong in the engine. Is that bad?
That's very bad.
It's the only time I've ever put oil in it. Put spark plugs in now, and after we do that, we can recheck the firing order, check for some spark. I don't have a key for this car, so we're gonna have to hot wire the coil real quick and cross our fingers and hope that we actually can make something work. Okay, we have all of the spark plugs in except for number 1. I've left it out, so I'm going to turn it over and attempt to find number 1 on the compression stroke, I hope. Now, in order to find top dead center and make it a little bit more accurate, I have this little endoscope here, and I've stuck it inside the spark plug hole. Oh, there it is. Well, unfortunately, I accidentally broke the cap when I was trying to take it off. It was literally glued on. But before I replace that, let's check for spark real quick. Oh, yeah, this distributor has certainly seen better days. Let's just even see if the contacts are working or moving at all. If not, we can file on them, make them work a little bit better. But let's check for spark. I'm not even going to fool with that set of points there. They look terrible. They're nice and corroded. There's the contacts out. Wow, they look bad. Look at how bad that is. So even if we did get a spark or some sort of 12 volts to it, I highly doubt it would have fired. And that is why we have our new ones right here. Nice and shiny contacts. Looking good. You know, there's something therapeutic about putting a set of points in an old distributor. Well, I say that until you drop the little tiny screw that only fits this distributor. And then it goes right down into the bottom of said distributor. And then you wonder, now what? Do I throw the whole car away? Well, it's not a bad idea. Well, I'll tell you what, seeing that spark at the distributor motivated me big time. Because this engine literally has not spun over in at least 40 years. And I personally did not believe that distributor was going to work. Like, I was legit saying, no, there's no way. It's corroded on the inside, it's corroded on the outside, the rest of the car is corroded, but it has spark now. We actually saw spark at the gap. So I'm going to take this small block spark plug here, I'm just going to pull a plug wire and see if I can ground this out and get any kind of spark in the gap. Oh yes. Okay. We have spark. Oh, we have spark. That is great. I'm going to spray a little hint of the good stuff here and just see if anything at all happens. Well, not that the carburetor is the only potential problem, but we can at least eliminate that. Got another carburetor here that'll bolt right on that, if it works, it's questionable, but I do know that it was on a running vehicle at least 2 years ago. I put it on there to move that car around, and that car has sat since, so I'm going to put that carburetor on here and attempt to see if that will fix anything. And this old carburetor AFB's just seen better days, and that is a fact. So I don't even know if this thing is even potentially able to be fixed, because the choke door is frozen solid. I mean, it's bad. It's going to need a complete overhaul to even be potentially close to being usable again. This is an Edelbrock 750 Cfm carburetor, so it's got an electric choke, which heck we're not going to use. But you can tell it looks like it's been through the ringer. It's been on probably like 300 different cars. I use it to get stuff running basically. It's not the best carburetor, but it'll do the trick. We're going to throw it on the intake here and just attempt to see if this is a little bit better than the old carburetor that we had. What is it? What are we on here? The throttle blade's not open? Are you joking me? How is that even possible? Let me verify spark again. I'm getting fire. I'm afraid we might still have to pull it out.
You think so?
It kind of concerns me. The fact that it has spark. It's got somewhat of fuel because of start fluid, but it just can't run, or at least hit at all. It concerns me. Ooh. 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 Are we 180 out now though? Because it kicked, but we have something now. We at least had fire. You know, typically when it's 180 out,
it'll backfire through the carburetor, but I didn't see anything. But I mean, that doesn't mean I'm wrong or I'm right. You know, it could be something totally different. Let's try it again. Let's see if we can make something else happen. She's 180 out now, but we're getting fire now. That means that it's, you know, trying to at least start. So that tells me that I had it right the first time, which is also a little bit concerning because, well, it didn't start. But now that I know we have fire, we have fuel, things are working at least. So let's take the distributor cap back off, spin it around, and see if we can make it run. We have the firing order back where it needs to be, and we'll see if it works. It didn't work. Well, I'm curious as to see if the lifters are even pumping up, so I'm going to take off this valve cover again. I already had it off once, and just enjoy how deliciously good all the rockers look. I'm going to spin it over and see if we can see any of the rockers moving. Woo! Got lots of blow-by coming out of there. Ew, that's nasty. Our lifters are pumping up. We have compression. It smells terrible, doesn't it? Ugh. God. We're moving some stuff that hadn't been moved since like 1902. Ugh. We've got spark. We've got some sort of fuel. We know it kicks back when it's 180 out. We know that the lifters are pumping up at least, so I feel like it ought to do something, you know. Unless I've messed something up catastrophic with the timing, and I can't tell you what could be wrong.
Okay.
We have tried literally every possible thing that I could think of. Checked firing order 5 or 6 times. We made sure that we had enough spark. I mean, everything adds up to an engine that should run, except for the fact that whenever you do a compression check, look at how much you get. We should be at 150 in that range. 120 be enough to probably fire it. We have 30. I think she's done. This stroke of bad luck did not make us give up. We started cleaning up the shop and got busy pulling the engine and transmission. I'm mid-engine pull, and I had to pull the transmission pan to get to the shifter cable, and I think I figured out why it was parked. Look how bad all this pan is. That is disgusting. There's even a screw laying in the pan itself, so I have a feeling that's why this thing was parked. I mean, looking up under the car, the valve body, everything internally, disgusting. Oh, that's pretty bad, pretty burnt up in here. So what I guess is what happened, the transmission probably burned up, ran low on fluid. You can see how nasty it is under here. It was probably leaking somewhere, maybe the front seal, and it ran out of fluid, burned up everything, and when they parked it, the engine itself got locked up, and that's what ruined it. So transmission issues caused this whole car to basically be ruined. Our 383 is out. It is on the engine stand, and it was quite a battle, not gonna lie. But we have everything torn apart, at least for our inspection purposes now. I need to get this chain off. We're gonna start with pulling the front accessories, get the power steering pump, AC compressor, alternator, get all the pulleys off, and then we will pull the intake, pull the valve covers, heads, kind of get an idea of what the lifter valley looks like, as well as the cam, lifters, push rods. Then we can see what the pistons look like, because I have a feeling they're not going to look too pretty. Whenever I was checking in the bore scope to find top dead center, it didn't look too hot. So we'll see. Ooh. It's kind of gray looking. It's weird. We let that drain. We'll leave it open until we finish up with the top side, so we know that all the oil is out. Whoa. Whoop. Not too bad, but also not too good. Something that I noticed whenever we were actually spinning the engine over is that there was never any oil coming up through the heads. Now on a Chrysler, the oil pump is on the big block up here on the front, and it's driven by the distributor. Oil galleys run through here, and as the hole in the cam gear and the cam lobe lines up, it'll shoot oil up through here into the rocker covers on both sides. Now something I noticed is that, well, it's not oiling on the driver's side, but we do have a little bit on the passenger side. This isn't the worst lifter valley I've seen before, but it's not great. I mean, we do have a good bit of sludge built up. It's okay. The cam, on the other hand, looks a little bit burnt. See that brown spot right here? Looks like it was run low on oil or just really old oil. So not the best, not the best. Now I have seen what that valve cover looks like off. Let's take a look at what's under valve cover number 2. Ooh. And just as expected, it's pretty much the exact same down here. Now what's supposed to happen whenever the oil fills up and goes up through the head, it'll actually fill up the rocker shaft. Now after that, it'll fill up right in here in these rockers and pour oil onto not only the push rod, but the valve stems. And that keeps everything kind of properly lubricated. Now, what it looks like is happening is that none of that is happening. So this thing is absolutely plugged up. So even if it did run, it probably wasn't going to be for very long until something gave way. Now the fact that this looks so bad makes me think, what else could possibly be bad? So let's go ahead and pull off all the rocker assembly, get the push rods out, and see just what we have. Let's get this exhaust manifold out of the way. Now we can start working on the cylinder head. I see we have 5/16 heads, and this is supposed to be a closed chambered head, so that's pretty good. That's pretty desirable for this engine. It's supposed to be a 383 HP from what I understand. Now, if that's the case, I don't know. I really hope so, because if it is, it's a good point to keep it. But if it's not an original engine, not worth it. All right. Head gasket has broken the seal. Here's what's going to determine the rest of this video. Well, there's 4 pistons. Now on this side, I know for a fact that 2 of the cylinders were down to like 30 psi on compression. So maybe that side was okay. Maybe this side is not so okay. We're about to find out. I'm a little bit nervous. Let's just wiggle this sucker loose. Please no coolant. That's pretty nasty. I mean, you can see this is the, that's all the stuff that I've been spraying in there to loosen up the cylinders. Let me try and spin it over, see if we can see what's just moving around in there. I mean, the boards don't look bad. They really don't, honestly. This one here looks like one of the cylinders that was stuck. See a little bit of a rust ridge around the middle there. So it was probably stuck down low. Now the other side, there's a couple more that were stuck on the high side. So we probably had a couple pistons that the rings had actually frozen on them. Now I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence here on what to do. We've got a little bit of a ring ridge. You can listen here. So my finger catches it. It's not a lot. I've seen way worse. I don't know if I can hone that out. I mean, it's pretty significant, and we'll just have to kind of see how things look on the bottom side once we get the pistons out and the crank out, just to kind of see how things look. So I've drained the coolant out of both sides and managed to only spill that much, so I'll consider that a win. Now I'm going to drop the oil pan, see what everything looks like inside the pan, if it looks pretty terrible, which I'm assuming it will. One thing I've noticed here is that this freeze plug actually popped too. You can see it's been leaking for quite some time. So that could also be another reason why it was parked. So if it was a freeze plug or transmission or just a combination of the two, I don't know. But so far it's not looking too great. Now something I did notice here is if you look, there's an ID pad that they stamp from the factory. And what it says, it might be hard to read, but there's an A, which stands for 1965, and a 383 for cubic inches. What that tells me is that this is not an HP engine. According to the casting numbers and that stamp right there, I thought this was an HP engine. This is just a regular old 383 from 1965 with some good closed chambered heads that are absolutely roached, but they don't look great. You can see here they look pretty rough. On the other cylinder head, that was where the low compression was. My guess is that it wasn't the ring's fault, which I haven't verified that yet, but I'm guessing that maybe a valve couldn't fully close because these things are terrible looking. All right, that should be the last bolt. Slowly drop her down. Not much better than everything else that we've seen so far. Wow, that's disgusting. I would be honestly amazed. I don't know if you can see that, but I think I figured out why this thing can't pick up any oil, because probably the oil pickup is clogged up. Man, that's nasty. Wow, I just wonder how can it get that bad? Honestly, how can it get that bad? I've seen engines that have not been ran in quite a long time, and they look pristine on the inside. But this thing, I don't know. They just really seem like they didn't treat the engine as good as they possibly could. That's the inside of the pan right there. And all this over here, this textured part, that's all sludge. Everything down in the bottom of the pan was just absolute toast, basically. And you can see here, look, do this right here. Look at that. That's all textured sludge. It's just turned to a solid, basically. It's been burned up real bad.
So this car, it's had a hard life. It's had a really hard life. I know she's looking awfully dry under here. And everything's spinning over like it should. That doesn't mean anything. Got a lot of sludge built up on every rotating part, so that's always a good sign. I mean, we have a forge crank. We've got everything there. Don't see any bolts backed out, anything crazy like that. So I reckon what we can do is just start disassembling things and see how stuff starts to look, I reckon. So we'll start with pulling out this old oil pickup tube here. So let me get that out of the way. Oh my God, look at that. This is what is in the pickup right there. Sludge. Wow, that's nasty. There we go. Can't really see in it, but the mesh screen is partially blocked. I don't know if you can see that, but it is partially blocked there. Drop that in the oil pan. I reckon we can start removing pistons here. We need to mark them and make sure they look good. How's the timing chain look? It's a chain, that's for sure. Kind of sad how the old girl ended up. I'm curious to see how these rod bearings look. Well, they don't look bad. At least this first one looks pretty good. That's honestly way better than I'd anticipated. The crank is it's a little bit grooved, but I mean, that's a pretty decent bearing right there. You typically see it look way worse than that. Okay, well, cool. Let's see if we can get number one out and see if we can figure out what's going on. Now, since this is a used engine, we are having to actually use what's called a ridge reamer. Now, the piston rings will create a ridge, literally, on the cylinder walls because it's rubbing back and forth, and as that piston ring wears against the cylinder wall, the spot where the ring comes up to, it doesn't come all the way to the top, it actually stops maybe half an inch from the very top of the bore. Because it's not wearing there, that's untouched. So all that wear is about a ½ inch down. Now, when you try to pull the piston out, the ring catches that. And because it catches that, the piston cannot come out this way. Now, what I was attempting to do while I pulled the crank first was I was actually going to see if I could get away with pushing it down that way. But there's probably just a tiny little bit of a ring ridge on the bottom side too. So that prevented me from going through the bottom. Now, since that's the case, it's not too much work, but it's just a little bit tedious. I'm going to go through and do every single piston in order with the cap that I took it off of and put them all in line. So I'm just working my way down each cylinder here using this ridge reamer to cut that ring ridge out and then take the piston out from the top side. Now you got to be careful whenever you're doing this, because if you catch this thing, it can nick the sidewall of the bore and the cylinder, and you don't want that. So I'm going to take a little bit of this PB Blaster here, just spray a little bit on the ring ridge, the cutting surface, all over. Just make sure that it has enough to keep it from actually cutting in too deep. Now we take this, or we tighten this up, which I've already tightened it, and we take this ratchet here, and you can hear it start to cut. Okay, we've cut a pretty good bit of it out. I think we need to tighten it up just a smidge, cut a little bit more, and it should be good. See, I can tighten it up just a bit. I'll spray a little bit more of this. And get back to it. Oh yeah, there we go. A little bit more resistance, but it's not binding up, so that means that it's cutting good, but not too much. There we go. And that is how you take the piston out. Well, here's all of our main caps, and surprisingly enough, everything honestly looks pretty good underneath. I mean, there's not a lot of excessive wear. You know, typically you'll see something with a lot of miles start to show a little bit of a goldish copper color, which that one does have a little bit of wear on it. But overall, that tells me that, you know, maybe the crank isn't as bad as I was expecting it to be, which it did have just a slight bit of wear, but really not a whole lot compared to what you would expect. For an engine that looks this disgusting, that's pretty good. That's really good, honestly. So I'm happy with how these look. Now the rod bearings, they have a little bit more wear in consideration to the main bearings. Now on the piston side, you can see it's got a little bit of wear right in the middle. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there's just a little bit of wear right in the middle there. And same thing over here with this one here. That one, yeah, a little bit of wear right there. The actual caps themselves, though, let's see how this one looks. If you look here, I mean, it really doesn't look that bad. Now, if we were to put this thing together, we would for sure want to put new bearings and everything in it, but I don't think that we would have to do any kind of turning on the crank, maybe a nice polish on it, and we would be good to go. So that's a good thing. That's a little bit less cost and labor on our side to have to deal with. And the crank looks pretty good itself too. You can see all the material here on the surface looks, I mean, it's got a little bit of wear, but genuinely there's just not a whole lot. The cam, on the other hand, it suffered a little bit more. I mean, there's some pretty burnt surfaces from probably oil starvation. It didn't fare as well as the crank did, but it still looks pretty good. I just wonder if we can get away with, you know, turning this one down, maybe, possibly. We're gonna see, we're gonna find out. The block itself is a little bit questionable. You can see it's pretty shiny in there, and it did have some ring ridge to it that you saw me cut out. Now, I want to get this checked out. I want to see, can we get away with a budget hone, or are we going to have to throw some money at it? Now, that's going to kind of determine what we do for the future here if this block is no good. If we can hone it, you know, then we could probably get away with it. And last but not least, probably the culprit for our low compression at the beginning is the original cylinder heads. Now these are 5/16 closed chambered heads, and what that means is that they actually are not domed, they're not open like, you know, in the later model or pretty much a lot of different combustion chambers. It's actually flat right here, and the combustion chamber is right here, while the piston is this entire surface. Now what this does, it increases your compression ratio by minimizing the size of the actual combustion chamber. It shrinks it so where your compression ratio goes up. Now, the valves look terrible. I was able to see all the rockers move and actually articulate. They weren't getting any oil. They probably are burnt up, probably has terrible valve stem seals. The valve stems are probably bad. I mean, look at this one right here. You can kind of tell it's somewhat open. So it's probably burnt valves, gummed up, nasty, sitting for forever. You can see this is like some of the lithium grease that I had sprayed down in the combustion chamber when I was trying to get it running in the original video. It's not good. So Yeah, I don't know what to do with these heads. It just kind of depends on how much it's going to cost. I don't know yet. We're going to have to see and just kind of figure out what the money's going to be thrown at. Now, if there are any doubts on the originality of this engine, look right here. Now, it's an upside down logo, but what this is, there's a D here, a P here, a C here, and another D. Now, what that stands for is Dodge, Chrysler, Plymouth, DeSoto. Now, that tells me that this is the original set of head gaskets that came off of this car. So, they've never been touched. It probably had some wear to it, but the pistons have never been out, the cam's never been out, the crank's never been out. From what I would guess, I mean, there could have been something that I don't know, but it's a 64 casting block. I saw that down here. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a 64 right there. It's an early build. This is May of 1964. So it's a very early casting. It's not an HP block, but the blocks are the same as far as you know, HP versus non-HP. It's just the pistons that are the difference, and, you know, later on the connecting rods. But this one, I mean, it was a zero-decked engine. It was from the factory, so, I mean, technically it probably did have some pretty good power for what it was. You know, a little mild cam could probably help out. What it's supposed to have is a very dull and cross-hatched look. That tells you that it'd be low miles. I have pulled engines apart that still have the original cross-hatching and look like they were just put together from the factory. This one, unfortunately, does not. Well, this was a pretty eventful roller coaster of a day. We had a lot happen. We went from a stuck engine to a spinning engine to an engine with no compression to a bare block. Well, I can't say that I haven't had a lot of fun, though. Now, what we have to do now is kind of figure out what we're going to do from this point. You know, the cylinders, they look a little bit glazy, but it's not something that can't be fixed. We might be able to get away with the hone and re-ring. Now, if we do that, we obviously need to check to make sure that the cylinders are not tapered or overworn to the point where they would need to be bored over. Now, how we're going to do that is take it to a machine shop. I'm actually about to load this thing up and take it there tomorrow morning. But you're not going to find out the verdict until next video. So if you want to see that, make sure you leave a like down below, subscribe, turn on the notifications so you don't miss anything, and I hope you guys are as excited as I am to see kind of what we find out, because again, this is going to determine what the final fate of this engine, at least for the time being, will be. So if you want to see that, tune in next week. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for being there and being so supportive. Order a t-shirt and your stickers if you have a chance to, because all that money that we get from that goes directly back into stuff like this. So you guys are the main force that drives the restoration, I guess you could call it, of all these old Mopars, Chryslers, Chevrolets, Dodges, Fords, Pintos. We won't talk about that one. I'll see you in the next one.